Hey everybody, happy, was it Wednesday afternoon as I'm recording this? One of the things that I get a lot of views on my channel is on the few videos I did way back when I started recording videos on Basic Expert. So I thought it was about time to take a look at, I guess, the king of the modern retro clones of Basic Expert, and that is Old School Essentials. I own some of the material back in its older name of BX Essentials, but I know that they had relaunched it or renamed. I think they kept it as two separate lines when I looked product lines. When I looked on drive-through and I picked up the basic rules, which is what I'm going to go through, there were two separate product lines. And I tried to do this before, and I accidentally set the wrong date, so I apologize if anyone was looking for the stream earlier in the day. That was my mistake. I was trying to mess around. I'm trying doing this stream straight to YouTube Live as opposed to going through Twitch, and I'm still fumbling my way through things, trying to figure things out. So I apologize in advance for any hookups along the way. If you are watching, let me know. If watching live, let me know in the chat if audio is anything amiss is coming up. Anyhow, back to Old School Essentials. It's probably seen by, I think it's kind of right now has the crown of maybe the most well thought of pure retro clone, at least of the BX line right now. I say because who knows, someone will come up with one tomorrow. Though at this point with these retro clones, I'm not sure what is left to do. They've done as good a job probably as you can ask for in just doing essentially another maybe editing pass on the BX rules, maybe reorganizing things a little bit, giving things a polish, adding some of the sensibilities that we've had, at least as optionally, that we've developed over the last 30 plus 40 years of gaming. But I believe the idea behind this was to hew pretty closely, it really as close probably as possible to vanilla Basic Expert. But here it's one of those things that you always wonder kind of at this point why put this out. Obviously the creators have their reasons for wanting to do that. Their love of it, and they want to build on it and make a brand. I say why only because at this stage in the game, it's no longer really hard to get a hold of regular old BX. It's available digitally on drive-through. The Rules Cyclopedia, which is not quite BX, but it's pretty darn close. I mean, it has a lot of extra stuff, but if you peel back to the core rules, it's essentially BX with a bunch of extra stuff that you can layer on top. Is also available digitally and print on demand. So it's interesting to see at this stage in the OSR game that there is this clone line, because when OSR started originally, a lot of the impetus of the movement was taking these older rule books, these game systems that were at the time really hard to get if you didn't already own them, or very expensive to buy if you didn't own them. And so they took these and said, let's rewrite them to kind of bring them back into the playing space. We have to just toe the line between trying to be faithful, but also trying to stay out of copyright and rights issues. So we would make these clones, and there are Labyrinth Lord and Basic Fantasy, and there was a host of these that came out. Then there was sort of an evolution of games. So you had games, I guess, in that second wave, like Lamentations of the Flame Princess, where they were using Basic Expert as a chassis, but now they're starting to branch out. It's as much about looking at a particular version, kind of if you could, if you look at someone that you really respected, I get, to put in today's sense, if Matt Mercer put together a D&D book that was sort of like D&D, but with all the things that he adds to it, right? Like a Critical Role house rule D&D would be the kind of books. And then you moved maybe in the wave we're in now, where a lot of games are trying to fill that space of what is the spirit of an old school style experience. What is that spirit like? but not necessarily, we're not going to necessarily pay attention to the mechanics. So we're going to look and see what it felt like. Something like a Torchbearer may be a good example. It's using a Powered by the Apocalypse style engine, so it's not really using any of the mechanics from old school D&D, but it's going after the feel that these particular creators had when playing it, and they're trying to recapture it, but in a very different way. And there's a lot of variations of that. So it's interesting how Old School Essentials, which is relatively new, BX Essentials, they're not super new, but not old either, are kind of going back to that original sort of OSR space of creating a really faithful clone. We'll see. But it's very popular. So obviously they're doing something right. You know, for me, looking at this, it's as much about answering the question of owning BX. I actually own 2 copies of BX. Would I invest in these books? Like, are they offering anything new to me? And I think they get lauded a lot for being very easy to read, very well organized. And so that'll be another kind of focus of me going through this is, are they really, how well organized are they? Do they really improve on the organization of the basic expert rules? Because I think those rules are actually pretty well organized. I think they have a really great form. So let's jump inside. I'm not going to read through everything. I think some of the other read-alongs I've done, when I've done modules, I've done other things, I kind of go through page by page, and I will still go through page, but this is going to be more abbreviated simply because a lot of it's going to be sort of rules that are new or not very, they're very familiar to me. So I'm probably going to be picking out highlights and saying, okay, this is interesting or this is not interesting. I'm not going to read through all the equipment. I'm not going to read through all the spells. I'm just going to glance over things like classes. So if you're someone who wants to get a really in-deep look at this, in a way, this may not be it, because I'm going to go down the pages, but I'm not going to be going over every option. But you get a feel for what's there. This is the basic rules. It's free. After this is over, I will dig up a link to it on Drive-Thru RPG so you can get it. So let's get in there and see what's what. Okay, here we go. Necrotic Gnome, the basic rules, table of contents, some thanks, introduction. Okay, about this game. What is Old School Essentials? Role-playing game of fantastic adventure. I'm not really concerned with this stuff. This is a basic rule set. It's free. There are a couple spots in the book I did a little flip through before that, that sort of prompt you to invest in their full-featured, full-price books. This is basically an art-free version, and if you're watching this as opposed to listening to this later in podcast form, I'm going to run up against some grayed out boxes that I presume there's some fancy dandy artwork in, but I'm not concerned about art at the moment. I'm concerned only about the content. So we got about this game, the basic rules, the complete rules, right? So the complete rules being what you could pay for. This is the basic rules. It's a free sampler, but it has the core of what you need. And then says a little bit here about new to old school games, which I will read because this is interesting to see what kind of context they put this in. Newer RPGs, i.e. post-2000, tend to work from a different set of design principles and have somewhat different play expectations than old school games. Players who are familiar with newer RPGs, but not with the old school style of play, may find the following documents useful. Both can be found online. Principia Apocrypha by Ben Milton, Stephen Lumpkin, and David Perry. Quick Primer for Old School Gaming by Matthew Finch. I have read both of those. They are both good resources. I'm not sure why they don't just include some URLs, or maybe even just ask their permission and host it on the Necrotic Gnome website to make it super easy. And this is a PDF, and they have a lot of nice linking in here, I discovered. So I'm not sure why they didn't just add links to those, but fair enough. We can search for it on the interwebs. Yes, we can. All right, I'm not going to cover terminology. I feel like we all know that well enough. I'm not sure what interesting things they have to say about that. Here we have, they're defining classic fantasy gaming. Let's see. This book presents all the rules required to run old school essentials games in classic fantasy settings. Are you saying you could not run them in non-classic fantasy settings? Most fundamental elements of this genre are as follows. Peril and adventure. All right. Wilderness. Then we got dungeons. Fantastic, which is treasure, monsters, magic, and sentient species. Interesting that they split those out. Let's see. Monsters, it says, are terrible creatures older than time, fierce of mythical beasts, chimeric biological experiments, tribes of beast-like half-men, beings from otherworldly dimensions. Inhuman creatures. Such inhuman creatures lurk in the wilderness and in dungeons, guarding wondrous treasure. Okay, so what's a sentient species? Fairies, malevolent and kind, dwarves in subterranean kingdoms, bestial humanoids, mutants twisted by magic. So what's the line between a beast-like half-man and a bestial humanoid? Because one apparently gets to be sentient, the other is merely a monster to be destroyed. All right, that's interesting. I don't know if I would have made that distinction. Maybe BX did too. I don't know. It seems a little bit like with the line blurs between some of those, but sure. I mean, I guess if you want to call out that, hey, none of these beings are intelligent and aren't just fodder for destruction, that is a good thing. Anything that puts your players and maybe the GM too in the mindset of look at other options besides just killing is good. But, you know, in these kind of games, if you just go around trying to kill everything, if the GM's playing it and not going too loosey-goosey with things, that's a hard road. You are as likely to die as to succeed on that one. Other books. All right, so here they're giving us, we have more books. Here they have a note. I'll read the note on house rules, since that seems important. None of the rules presented in this book are to be taken as quote-unquote gospel. If the players and referee wish, any rule may be expanded, altered, or removed. Such tweaks to the rules are known as house rules. Every group will end up with their own unique way of playing tailored to their particular tastes. That said, the rules have been carefully designed and very thoroughly battle-tested. Many groups will be perfectly happy with the rules as written. Beginning players, bolded, are advised to play with the rules as written for some time before starting to change anything. That's wise advice. Not always possible because sometimes you want to play a game and you're the GM and you don't know anything, but you do know that you need to make adjustments to get the kind of game that you want. So you just kind of have to do it and just play around with it until you get what you want. But yes, in general, if you can learn the rules and play with them a bit before you decide to change them, you'll probably make better decisions than if you just start cutting and hacking at them without educating yourself. All right, mixing and matching. All right, that's just saying that these rule modules, I guess, that they offer, you can mix and match them as you need to. And of course, you can roll your own. Compatibility. Okay, it's basically compatible with pretty much everything OSR. It's saying that these rules are 100% compatible with BX, which is great because BX is pretty much compatible with everything. So you're compatible with BX, you're compatible with a whole bunch of OSR stuff, and it's in the rules cyclopedia, but there's a section at the back of there about converting from first edition, which is AD&D, to BX, or, well, really BECMI, Basic Expert, was it Companion? What's after M? Last one's Immortal. Master something? Basic Expert? No, Companion? Maybe Master? I don't know. Anyway. Especially BX with more steps and more subsystems. Point is that when you look at how trivial it is back there, it's only, I think the section in the back of the rules cyclopedia is like a page or 2 pages. Trivially easy to convert things back and forth. So if you get to a point where you're pretty much in step with BX, not only do you get all the stuff with that kind of rule set, you get all the stuff with AD&D that's very easy to convert. I don't know what the conversion's like from 2nd edition to 1st edition. It might not be that much. And then you get all the stuff that's just for OSR material, old and new, that's been created. So you get a lot of stuff out there. Oodles and oodles of stuff with OSR. Really, really easy. And because the rules are pretty simple, even if stuff isn't technically compatible, it's pretty easy to use them and generate your own compatible stuff. And apparently they have some guidelines are on their website if we want them. Okay, player characters. I guess this is about player characters or for player characters to read. Don't know. We got game statistics. Okay, I'm not going to go through all of these, but it is good to define them. I'm always a fan of defining your terms before you throw them out there too much. So here we get all that. Your ability scores, your class, your race, your level, experience points, your prime requisite. Oh, and shout out, I guess, rest in peace, Terry Jones, Monty Python member who passed this week. That's a Monty Python reference, and I read that he died. So, poor little out for Terry Jones. You got your alignment, got your hit points, got your hit dice, got your armor class, got your Thaco. I know Thaco gets a bad rap. I think that's a little bit undeserved. I know addition is easier than subtraction a bit, so I get that ascending AC or ascending rolls in general, AC and hit are probably the way to go. I get that. It's just a little bit more efficient on the brain and a little bit easier. But Thaco wasn't terrible, and cross-checking the hit matrix really is pretty simple. I just feel like it got a lot of hate, and it sort of became that Thaco, oh, how horrible, and it's not that bad. No, I mean, I didn't find it bad at all. All right, we got saving throw values. They have a option rule using ascending AC because BX was descending, so they're sticking with descending. But if you want to change it to ascending, you can, and a lot of OSR materials, particularly more recent ones, a lot of the systems and everything use ascending AC, so it's very easy to switch back and forth. It's usually just taking descending and adding 9, or is that when you, or subtracting from 20 or 19? Yeah, I think it's subtracting from 20 or 19. So if you have a 0 armor class, your armor class is basically 20. If you have a negative armor class, you're 21, 22 that way. Something like that. Pretty easy to do. We got movement rates, and then a note that we have class abilities coming up. Okay, here we go. Creating a character. I'm going to run through the steps. I'm not going to spend a whole lot of time on this. I'm really just looking for any interesting notes. So we're going to roll ability scores. Check. Subpar characters. I have the option, or the GM option to reroll them. Check. You're going to choose your class. This is something that actually threw somebody. I think this was on, I don't remember whether it was Facebook or Reddit or Twitter, but it really threw someone, and it's probably not the only one it's thrown. This concept, if you're not going, again, people play it in many different ways, but, it's sort of classic by the book is you're going to roll your stats first. Then you're going to look at what those stats present you with. And then you see how you can mold those stats into the most survivable, potentially powerful character that you have. It is not, you don't walk in with the character concept and say, this is what I'm going to play. You can do that, of course. You can do that. But if you say, oh, I want to be a super powered fighter and this and that, and then you roll and you have a strength of 7, but you have a wisdom of 14 and you have an intelligence of 12, you can still be that fighter. No question. You can be the fighter if you want to be the fighter. But you're going to be a poor fighter compared to even the guy with just 10 strength who might decide to be a fighter. Of course, you would make a pretty good cleric. You'd make an all right wizard, potentially, right? Any of those. So you roll your stats, then you pick your class, and then after that, you look at your prime requisites, you look what you really need, and then as they're saying in their step 3, you're going to adjust your ability scores to even get you even more in there. So if you are a fighter, you see your strength, maybe you're at strength 14, you look like you have some other stats. It's really a way of being able to, in a sense, min-max your character a bit. You can only do it with strength, intelligence, wisdom. You can't do it with your con. You can't do it with your charisma. Those are fixed. So if you look at it and you're like, I want to be a fighter, and I have strength 14, and I have intelligence 13, I have wisdom 12. I don't care about those so much. So let me try to jack up that strength as much as possible. That's my prime requisite, and I'll lower the other ones. But that's after you pick your class. You go scores, look at those scores. Oh gosh, what can I be that's decent? And sometimes there's nothing particularly decent, and you just play with one. But I've often found that those characters, they make it, and sometimes they thrive. The thing is, the nice thing about these games too is, unlike in say 5th edition, you're not tied into having, you got to have an 18 strength by the time you're level 4. You're behind the curve. You don't. They definitely affect some things, but almost all your improvements are going to come through your class. As your class goes up, you're going to get more things. That's really where your advancement lies. So, which means that it's all about that surviving and leveling up. Your stats will play less and less of a role over time. So you get some nice perks, but it's not something to be too concerned about. Okay, note ability score modifiers. Okay, yeah. So you got your ability scores, your final ones after going through this thing. Then you're going to note them, note the modifiers. They're going to note the attack values. So here's interesting. They give you the table on your attack values, but they haven't given you the table on your score modifiers, which seems like that's the one you would get to first if you were going to go that way. Or the adjustment. Yeah, I don't know why they put the table there. Or maybe it's just an example. It's just kind of, all right, they just kind of threw that table in there. Mine. I can note the attack values and I can check them because I believe, and I'll find out later if this is true, that my memory is that basically at first level, every class has the same attack modifier. One thing I liked about Lamentations is that fighters were the only ones that could improve their attack, their to hit bonuses over time. Everything else just got to +1 and stuck there, which I thought was nice. So I like any. I'm a fan of pumping up fighters. I think fighters often don't necessarily get enough love. It's addition to addition and style to style, but anything to beef up fighters, particularly in combat, I'm pretty much all for. Okay, so we've done that stuff. Now we're going to note our saving throws and class abilities, which we'll find out down the line. We're going to roll for our hit points. Option rule to roll for 2. We'll choose our alignment. We'll note down the languages that we know. Don't forget we'll get those alignment languages. We can buy some equipment. We note down our armor class once we have figured out what clothes and armor we're wearing. Obviously, within the limits imposed by our class choice, we will note our level and XP, which is generally speaking going to be level 1 and 0, unless you're starting, obviously you're starting somewhere else, but, by default. Then we'll give our character a name. Notice we're not particularly concerned. They haven't mentioned anything at all on backstory. I'm a fan of having some little story, just something small. But these games, really starting out, your story is everything going forward, and stuff behind you is not really relevant. These games are, generally speaking, the old school games, it's really not about fulfilling destinies foretold of since you were a child, or getting something from your backstory and then accomplishing that task. You're all about pushing forward. But it's interesting that given this is a modern clone, and not that they have nothing about backstory in here. Maybe it's in one of their other rule modules, and obviously there are plenty of tools out there, OSR and Modern, for figuring out backstory and doing group backstory and all that kind of stuff. I think Fate, I always think of Fate Core, but I know there are other ones that have the good, particularly if you're doing kind of group backstory work, has some good mechanics and just a good technique, some good tools for doing that. So here we get to ability scores. Strength is for melee and opening doors. Intelligence is for languages and literacy. Wisdom is for magic saves. Dexterity is for AC, missile fire, and initiative. Constitution is for hit points. Charisma is for reactions. Yay, reactions. Maximum retainers. Yay, retainers. And retainer loyalty. Yay, loyalty. I'm a big fan of those things, so it's good to see them. I feel like the modern game could do a little bit more with those, but parties are so self-sufficient now that you don't have the same needs as you did back then. If you can hear, there's a Goya truck passing by. I'm on the second floor, so I do get noise from the window, so I apologize if any of this noise interferes with the stream. Generally, my street is quiet, but you do get some through traffic for whatever reason. Like, we're a residential street, but every once in a while, just randomly, a Goya truck will decide to drive down. All right, a little bit more about the prime requisite. If you get a good score in your prime requisite ability score, then you will get some extra XP. If your ability score is really bad, you might get a penalty to XP. Another reason why you want to sort of max out as much as you can that requisite, if it's possible. It's not always possible, but if it is, not a bad idea. And here we get the tables. So you have the strength modifiers that range from -3 to +3. But, generally speaking, those are only on the edges. Strength of 3 or strength of 18. So everything else is pretty much -2 to +2. And a lot of people are going to be in that 9 to 12 range, which is basically 0. We've got our intelligence modifiers and how many languages we get, plus our literacy level. Wisdom modifiers for saves, dexterity modifiers for all that stuff, constitution. All right, so just modifiers. A whole page of modifiers. Alignment. All beings, whether PCs, NPCs, or monsters, adhere to one of the 3 philosophies or spheres of behavior known as alignments. I haven't read the BX one in a while, so I don't know if this is cleaving closely to that, if they're sort of writing their own alignments, but lawful is essentially, or law is basically your good alignment. Neutral is neutral, and chaos is essentially evil. I mean, depending on what edition they kind of play with things differently. But reading these, so here you go. Lawful beings believe in truth and justice. To this end, they will follow laws and believe all things must adhere to order. Lawful beings also believe in sacrifice to a greater good and will choose the good of a larger group over the good of an individual. It's an interesting way to put it. Not sure I agree with that, but it's all about, you just need a standard for the table. I always think the alignments are another thing that get a bad rap, but the problem is that everybody has very different ideas of what alignments mean, and you have to have that conversation about this is what alignments mean. So whether I necessarily agree with these in my game, it doesn't really matter. They're going to be useful for somebody, and the point is that whatever I decide, if I decide to change them, I should write down and present or orally present it as session 0 type of thing to players so that everyone's on the same page with what these mean. But by having only 3 options, essentially the 2 poles of law and chaos and neutrality in the middle, there's a lot less gray area. You're not worried about, my lawful good or chaotic good or neutral good. Like, it's all, you much less gray, much less overlap, much less lines being drawn that you have to try to remember or have the same conception of. You really just have to have the conception of 3 things. So we talked about law just there. Let's see what they say for neutrality. Neutral beings believe in a balance between the idea of law and chaos, and in their actions tend to do what will serve themselves. They might commit good or evil acts in order to further their own ends, and generally will not put others' needs ahead of their own. All right, so kind of neutral. You almost read that as a kind of a light chaotic evil. They're not, this is kind of what most players I think would probably choose, because you can do whatever you want when you want to do it. You're not really beholden to one side or the other. Chaotic beings, chaos. Chaotic beings are in direct opposition to law. These beings should seldom be trusted, for they tend to act in quote-unquote evil ways and are utterly selfish. Chaotic characters believe in chance and that there is no innate order to life. All right. So they kind of say they tend to act evilly, but really they're just selfish. So there are a couple of ways that alignment can come in. One is the original way was kind of this Michael Moorcock system of almost that there were 2 cosmic teams, law, chaos, and that there were the unaligned that were on neither team. That morphed from, the white box to probably BX probably has the same one. Again, I haven't looked in a while, so I can't remember off the top of my head. There's something more like this, where it's imparting morality onto this law chaos axis. And then in first edition, and maybe in the Holmes version of D&D, the blue box from the late 70s, which was between the white box and basic expert. I don't know if I think they had they might have gone to the more now traditional compass rose. I can't remember. And you get the modern one, which is basically following the AD&D model of having the kind of 8-point, whatever it is, compass rose of alignment. But in the beginning, it was just basically you're picking teams, and there was really had no impact on your morality. So that's definitely an option if you don't like these. I like a little bit of a mix. I like the cosmic teams. I like that there is a bit of a moral imperative, because I think limitations on characters and their actions is a good thing, whether I'm a player or I'm a GM. I'm not really a fan of I don't want any limits, so I can just do whatever's the most easy for me to do in a moment, which is just the most profitable. That to me is boring. Number one, I want the challenge of I'm good, but I have these things, so I can't just do whatever I want. I like that stuff. So, but there you have it. Law, neutrality, chaos, revealing alignment. Hey, you have to tell your referee of your alignment. Yes, always tell your GM your stuff. Don't keep secrets from the GM. Don't play games with the GM. If you don't trust that the GM is being neutral or playing fair, have that conversation with them. But there's no point to trying to play games with the GM as far as telling them stuff or withholding stuff. It's just going to end poorly, and the person who will suffer is probably you or the GM or both. Don't do it. It's like, your doctor and your GM. Listen to them all. Role-playing alignment. Okay, so there's a note of role-playing alignment, which you don't need to worry about it. Basically, you should play your alignment, and if you don't, the GM can take steps. Languages. We got the common tongues. We have alignment languages. I think originally I didn't really specify what the heck an alignment language was. It just existed. The nice thing about alignment languages as a thing regardless of how you choose to implement it, is it gave you a last-ditch effort to be at diplomacy. So the idea is you have all these languages, and you have creatures that are showing up, and you're using reactions. So just because it says it's an ogre or a troll, it doesn't mean that it's automatically going to attack you. It would come down to how this particular creature reacts to your presence. And if you roll a neutral or positive reaction, they may not want to fight you, or they may at least be open to not fighting you. So what do? Well, you can try to talk to them, but you don't speak troll. Maybe you try giant or goblin. You don't speak those. Again, with a troll, maybe you think, oh, this thing is definitely a creature of chaos, but then maybe you have a party member who's of the chaos team. If you think so, and sometimes you don't always know what the monster is, right? Troll, maybe you know, but maybe it's something else you don't know. So you take that gamble. You have this person come up and say, okay, I can speak law. Let me try talking law to it. If the creature is lawful, you can communicate, and bam, you're good to go. You can continue on with trying to run this as a social encounter and trying to use your diplomacy and make a deal and do all that great stuff and talk to them. If he's not, then they'll attack you right away. So it's really an all or nothing gambit. If you fail, if you pick the wrong alignment and go with it, then, the battle is on. They will just fight you, regardless of where they hear it. They had something like, it doesn't matter where you are. You could be in the tavern, all amongst people, and you start talking in that alignment language. Anybody of the other alignment who hears you is coming after you. And that was one of the advantages of being on a team, because if you pick neutral, you lose that perk. The perk of having that alignment language that you can fall on. You would lose, I think another perk you kind of lose is most, if not all, magic weapons. I think if they have alignments, it's either law or chaos, not neutral. So by not picking teams, yeah, you're free of some things. Maybe you're free of things just attacking you out hand, or you're not, you won't be affected by, say, protection from law spell or protection from chaos. But the flip side is that you lose some perks. And one of those is alignment languages. Okay, so other languages, yeah, demi-humans, they have languages too. Okay, coin conversion rates. I wonder why this is one of those weird decisions. Why I put the table up here when I haven't read wealth yet? I don't know. It seems like you could easily just put it at the bottom of the page. Anyhow, it doesn't really matter for my purposes. Okay, experience, prime requisite, modifiers, leveling up, maximum XP in one session. So let me just see if they say anything interesting. All characters who make it through an adventure alive receive experience points awarded by the referee. So here's my first question mark. Why do they say through an adventure? What is an adventure? In their brains, what do they mean when they say made it through an adventure? Usually the way I've always run it, and I think all the games that I've always played in, you had to get loot back to town. You go into a dungeon, hopefully you get some loot off of things, you drag that loot back to town, you get to your sort of safe space, your haven, your village, and then you convert that loot to XP. Is that what they mean by an adventure? Like each adventure is one foray out into the wilds and into the dungeons? Because I could see people running with that and saying, okay, well, I'm going to run Keep on the Borderlands. That's the adventure. Does that mean that nobody's getting any XP until the end of Keep on the Borderlands, whatever that end is? It's a little bit unclear. I wonder if they will expound on this later and make it clear, or this is just the way they do it. But if it is adventure, hopefully they mean, or I think you should take it to mean, the end of a particular foray into dangerous places. Get your loot back to safety. You convert it to experience. Okay, so we just have this, leveling up. All right. I like using training rules for leveling up, but obviously you don't have to. It's not by the book, but some edition had rules for it. Maybe it was first edition. I don't know. I just think it's a nice way to be able to have time spent, makes the world feel alive. It adds some interesting, I think, nuance to things. But anyhow, on to wealth. So we got money in different settings. Okay, they're using gold piece-based standard. It's fine. I mean, BX is gold standard, so that's fine. I like silver standard myself, but nothing wrong with good old gold. You can set up some inheritance in case you die on the tough lands or the dungeons below. That's also good. All right, character classes. So I'm gonna go through these pretty quickly because there's nothing really special about these. If you're familiar at all with old school character classes, you are going to be very familiar with these. I think the one wrinkle to this book, being that it is a free basic book, is they don't give the classes so it's using race as class, which is the same as BX used, but it is not in this booklet giving us race as class. It's not giving us the racial classes for dwarf, elf, or halfling. These are only going to be the human classes. So first we have the cleric. Prime requisite wisdom, hit dice 1d6, max level 14, right? They can use any armor, they can use any blunt weapon, and they know their alignment language, they know common. And so we get, they got magic, they've got turning undead. The one takeaway is when you're looking at the cleric level progression, you do not get spells until level 2. This is another change that Lamentations made, is they allow clerics to have a spell at level 1. Not a bad thing, but it really does emphasize how you really have to, it's a hard scrabble. You really got to survive because you do not have any healing at level 1. Level 1, you can maybe get a hold of potions. Maybe you can buy them. Someone will give them to you, but there is not a single class by the book that's got healing at level 1. You have to somehow fight and claw your way through to level 2, and then you will finally get a healing spell. A whopping 1 healing spell per day for the clerics. So you get to turn stuff. You can turn stuff from level 1 though. So the not under the benefit, but obviously clerics, the big thing they can do is they're almost as hardy as fighters. They're just as good at hitting things. They can wear the same armor, so they can be just as well protected via armor class. The weapons, yeah, they have to use blunt weapons, but they're not any worse in terms of damage than fighter weapons. And then they can turn undead. So when you're running into things that are low-level enemies, skeletons and zombies, cleric's very handy. And then, as they say here, you can reach 9th level. You can get a stronghold, get some followers and stuff. Good stuff if you like the kind of end game of domains. We get the fighter. No requirements. Strength. 1d8 hit dice. Any armor, any weapons. They can create a stronghold at any time, and they can get titles starting at 9th level. And there's the fighter progression with their saving throws. Magic user. Not a lot of hit points. No armor. Can only use daggers. They do get magic, but magic user at level 1 gets a whopping 1 spell. So hopefully you get a spell. Depending on the game you're played, and I don't think they cover this in the rules, but in the modern game, we're so used to magic users being able to choose the spells they get. Very often, I ran games like this too, and I played in them, where you would roll randomly to see what spells were you got starting out, which meant your one spell might be, not a good spell. You're hoping for the really big money spells at low levels were, magic missile, sleep is a good one. Sleep is great. I mean, charm person is amazing. If you can manage to charm a dumb humanoid type, they could be your slave for months. It wasn't one of these, it's so watered down. You look at 5th edition. No, they feel like they're your good friend and it lasts a minute or something. Charm person, if the dice go right, they can be your slave for months of game time. Months. So imagine you early on, you run into, say, an ogre, and you're wetting your pants because it's going to destroy you, but you happen to cast that spell and it fails. It's saved really badly. Now you suddenly have this ogre you could march in front of you for months. It was craziness. But if you don't get those, you could end up with really, comprehend languages, which granted is useful, but when you're in a dungeon, you're in combat, and you're holding a dagger, and you've got comprehend languages in your pocket, not very comforting maybe to the rest of your party. So, the life of a wizard. You got to go for that long. You play magic as you're playing the long game. All right, you have thief. Dex, also not a lot of hit points, hit dice. Only a d4. Leather armor, no shields, but any weapon. Backstab. So something to keep in mind, again, if you're playing an old school game, if you're reading this, if you're interested in this old school essentials and you want to play a thief, don't count on backstab to be your money ability. It's a neat little trick. It can be useful, no doubt. But if you're looking at this is where you're getting your moment-to-moment play from, you can't do it. It just doesn't work. Let me read you their description here so you can get a sense of how difficult it is to, unless your GM, bends over backwards for you to get backstab. Backstab. When attacking an unaware opponent from behind, Thief receives a +4 bonus to hit, right? So this is actually slightly less than, say, Advantage in 5th edition, which is generally about a +5. This is actually a little bit less. So you're not even getting full advantage. You're getting like 3/4 advantage, and it doubles any damage dealt. So you're getting a little bit less than advantage, and you're getting double damage. But you have to be both. Your opponent has to be unaware of you, and you have to be behind it. And if you think that's easy, number one, most things you're going to run into in the dungeon, unless you're lucky, are going to be facing generally where you're coming from, right? If you're invading a castle and you're trying to get in the throne room, the guards are going to be usually, guarding the door, going to be facing out to where you're coming from. And then if you're in combat, say, and you're like, oh, I'm going to get behind somebody, they have to be unaware of you. And generally speaking, once you're seen once, people aren't going to magically forget you. You don't have the sort of magic hide in shadows, burst out, and get advantage again. It's hard. You'll be lucky if you get a few backstabs, maybe a backstab a session. I would say, wow, that's really clever, ingenious play if you could manage to get one a session. That is not your bread and butter. In 5th edition, backstab, or whatever they call it now, what do they call it? Whatever, is your bread and butter. This is not your bread and butter. You are not a combat class. You are not a glass cannon type. You are really that jack of all trades. This kind of stuff that we're going to get to below, right? Read languages. You go up in level, you'll be able to read languages as if, anything non-magical text, you can start to read it. That's when you get to 4th level. You can use scrolls once you get to 10th level. You have these thief skills. Climb sheer surfaces. Find or remove. I don't know why they call it treasure. They say treasure traps. I don't know what distinction they're making, but you have, basically traps, hear noises, hide in shadows, move silently, open locks, pickpockets. So, in combat, you are not the equal of a fighter or a cleric. You probably never will be. Maybe at some point when you get scrolls, maybe you can work with your wizard. You guys have found enough scrolls. You can cast some spells and do stuff off of scrolls once you hit 10th level. Your utility is really coming in all those outside combat moments where your skills will come to the fore. You are the scout. You are the person that is out in front, sneaking down the hallway. You are trying to maybe get a count of the guards in the room before the rest of the party marches up, or detect any traps, or, pick locks silently, or get into a good position for something, using your wall climbing ability. That's where the utility is going to come from, not from backstab. And then after reaching 9th level, you can start a Thieves' Den, kind of Thieves' Guildy sorts of things. All good. Here's level progression. And then they have the bit about, here's your skill table for Thieves. It's the same as Basic Expert. They did a weird thing where almost all of them are using percentile dice, except for hear noises. I kind of would have liked it if they just would have converted it all one way, either all X and 6 or all percentile. But, they're trying to be true to the original one, so I guess that's fine. But I would have just done the math and figured out that, because it just makes it a little bit easier. And then there's a little note here about that rolling for hide in shadows and move silently is done by the ref, the GM, because the player's always going to think they're hidden or they're silent, which is probably true. So some good guidance. Here we have equipment. I'm not going to go over equipment. I think we all know equipment. Weapons and armor, all standard stuff. Here we have some rules on encumbrance. I like encumbrance. I know it's one of those things that gets hand-waved away all the time, but there's a lot of mechanisms in the game that kind of interlock. Encumbrance is one of those. Encumbrance and time and resources, these all work together to make certain subsystems or certain mechanics viable. Like, if you're going to have something that make, hirelings and retainers and all those things become important when you have to deal with things, because you realize as a party, you can only carry so much. You can only take so much with you. You only have so many hands. So we need somebody to carry this torch. Nobody in the party wants to carry it. Okay, let's hire some poor slob to carry the torch for us. Oh, we have too much. This treasure's too heavy. We need some porters to get the treasure back to town. Or we want to get a horse and a cart, and we need people to man the horse and the cart. Then we need people, when we're in the dungeon, who's guarding the horse and the cart. All this stuff works together. All these little ecosystems, they all work together to give you a certain feel for the game, to give you, to give the game certain characteristics that come together. They all interlock. If your party is super self-reliant and you throw in them bags of holding and they don't have to worry about encumbrance, they don't have to do anything, then there's not much reason for them to hire retainers. There's no reason for them to get a horse and cart. There's no reason for them to then need guards. And then not needing that stuff, they don't spend the gold, because if you're hiring retainers, if you're hiring guards, if you're hiring hirelings, all these things, they take some gold out of your pockets. They take some part of that experience. They get their own, bits of that taken out. And that again creates a need for you to go adventuring. I need money for hirelings. I need all this money. That means I need to make money. How do you make money? You get out there and do it. So it keeps, all these systems keep kind of pushing you to do stuff, pushing the party to go out there and go through this cycle. When you start to take some away, I think you run into what a lot of people run into in the modern game is, how do you keep that cycle going when we don't have the kind of gravity of these things pushing the water wheel of gameplay are no longer flowing, right? The water's not flowing. How do we keep the wheel turning? Well, you have to come up with other things. So I would say, particularly playing this style of game, encumbrance is a good tool. Use it. There are different ways you can look at to minimize the pain points of tracking it, but I don't really think it's all that bad. But obviously your miles may vary, but it's a useful cog in the gameplay machine. So don't just ignore it out of hand. Here we got more stuff about weapons, weapon qualities, weapon damage, variable damage, fine, great. Adventuring, here we go. Party organization. All right, fine. Marching order. Yeah, marching order is good. I always have parties give me their marching order. I think even here they talk about giving several formations. You might have a 2-column formation for out in the wilderness. You might have a one-man, 1-column formation for in a dungeon. You may have different marching orders for, combat, opening doors, when you're searching. All good stuff. The collar. They mention the collar. I'm a little bit surprised that they do, because it's kind of an old school thing that has long gone out of fashion. Basically, the idea with the collar was that one person would be nominated to speak for the group. So the players all huddle up, talk amongst themselves. Then one person would communicate what the party has decided to do to the GM. So there are a couple things there. It can be a little bit faster, because you just basically have one source of talking. You get everything in order, then you spit it out and go, and the caller can basically just run it with the GM. And obviously you're not sworn to silence, you can't talk, but so it just kind of keeps the game moving. Now, there are a couple things you can do here if you wanted to try the caller in your game. I don't think I've seen any shows or any online streamed games use callers, but if you're running a game and you have people at your table who are shy and aren't comfortable talking, a couple things you can do. You can rotate callers, which forces everybody to take a turn, and for some people that might help them sort of push them into the spotlight. There are some players that they're a little bit nervous, but they're more nervous just because they haven't done it, and since certain stronger personalities may always take over and always kind of take the spotlight, this is a way of you as a GM saying, okay, it's your turn to be caller, the spotlight's on you. And some players are going to blossom under that. It's not that they didn't want to, but just maybe they weren't pushy about it. They weren't forcing their way into the spotlight, so they were getting overlooked a bit. And this is a way to give it to them, because you can make them the caller, and for that session, or how many sessions, you could rotate on whatever schedule you like, they are in command of talking to you. They're there. The flip side is that you have people who are shy and they really don't want to talk. And I've seen this on Reddit and other forums, people posting, I really want to try D&D. I'm really just nervous. I feel like, I don't want to talk. I'm not comfortable talking in front of a whole bunch of people. Having the caller takes the heat off of them, because now they can get in the huddle up with the other players, talk it out, and then somebody else who doesn't mind speaking out can do the speaking for them. So it really can kind of work in two different ways. Obviously, you don't need it, but it is a bit of a, it is a bit of a sort of a vestigial, role at this point. But it's nice that they have it, and it might be worth trying. If you've been trying to think of ways to get different people engaged in the game, it's easy to, just make different people the caller, because it doesn't actually change anything fictional. You're not taking attention away from anyone's character. You're just putting different players in the spotlight. Okay, mapper. One player should create a map. I agree. I know Roll20 and Fantasy Grounds have made mapping a bit of a moot point, but have players map. Force them to take notes. I would never give the party a map. When I was doing my play-by-post game, and my my description wasn't clear, I might post a fragment to show what I meant by when I was trying to say describe a very non-neat geometric space, but I would never just hand out maps. You map it up. It's your responsibility. Same thing with notes. That's always been the rule in the games I've played and or I've run. You're responsible for your character's memory, not a roll, not anything. You take notes. The golden rule was, hey, GM, do I remember? Does my character remember X, Y, or Z? Your responsibility is be, did you write it down? Is it in your notes? If it's in your notes, you did. If it isn't, you don't. Boom. That's it. That may seem harsh, and it may seem, our schedules, and this and that. It's only been 30 seconds in game time. I don't care. Not my problem. Write it down. It doesn't take much. Of all the effort a GM puts in to track all kinds of stuff and do all kinds of stuff. As a player, if you just can't write down the NPC that we're supposed to deliver the item to, his name is Fred, then, I don't have a ton of sympathy for you. Okay, here we have some notes on dividing treasure. Fine and good. XP awards. All characters who returned from an adventure alive. All right, again with the calling it an adventure. I don't understand that. I thought maybe they would use a different word or explain that a little bit. Hopefully, if you're reading this, I assume, I don't know. I think the idea is that you, maybe at the end of a session of adventuring, you'd get it. But I would hope that people don't read that saying you have to get through an entire module adventure before you get experience. And by the way, a lot of old modules, maybe most of them, at least up until a point, were sort of built that you would make forays into the wild. You would go into the dungeon, maybe do it a few times, and then you would retire back to your safe place. And it makes sense that you get back to that safe place where you're not on your guard, and you've essentially succeeded. In a weird way, it's almost like having that save point in the video game where you go off and you do stuff, and then you come back to your save point that's in the safe spot. So you get there, you get your reward. But it shouldn't be at the end of an adventure. But maybe they're defining adventure as a foray. But I just wish they would say so, because this I feel like it could be confusing, but maybe I'm overthinking of it. All right, so you get most of your experience points is coming from recovered treasure. If you look at the chart for defeated monsters, you'll see that even massively nasty monsters at the higher echelons of their hit dice do not get you much XP compared to finding some treasure. Let that be a note. Yes, you can kill monsters for treasure, but you can kill monsters for XP, but if that is you think that's going to be your main method of getting XP is going to be a monster killer, you're in for a long road and you will probably die young and penniless. Just get the loot. Just get the loot. You gotta really plan out your risks in these games. So just taking on combat just to do it is not a recipe for success. All right, so you have defeated monsters. Tells you a little about that. And get some calculus for it that I'm not going to get into. Division of experience. Okay, bonuses and penalties. I think that's for your prime requisite again. Or no, this is for you may optionally grant XP bonuses to players who did particularly well. I don't like that stuff. I don't want it to be a please the GM game. So I really dislike those where they suggest pleasing somebody, whether it's the group or the GM, is your way to extra XP. I would rather have more concrete and transparent. Like in some of my games, I like to emphasize exploration. I will give XP. I will award XP for hexes searched, hexes explored, and that's clear. Players will know that up front. They can go out and explore hexes, and they can earn XP. It's not like you don't have to do it well. You don't have to meet some threshold that only I know. You know what you need to do. Get loot, explore, maybe other things. You can define them, and you get XP. Time, weight, and movement. Very important stuff on tracking time. You need to track time. Time is the main mechanism by which things will happen in dungeons, in the wilderness. It's all about time. Time determines your drain of resources. Time determines how far you can move. Time determines how long your spells have to go. Time determines how long you have light if you have torches. Time is huge. Track it. Learn. Use ticks. Use boxes. Print out graph paper. Use boxes. Use tick marks. Whatever works for you. Track time. And they talk about movement to the ground. Let's see, group movement, rounds and turns. A turn, they're calling a turn. I usually call it an exploration turn, but yes, 10 minutes. There are 6 turns in an hour. Anything you do, basically, just round it to 10 minutes. That's the easy way. You're searching the room. Every 10 feet, that's 10 by 10, that's 10 minutes. You're walking, I think, 120 feet, something like that. That's 10 minutes. You go through a combat, and then, combat plus the wrap-up, that's 10 minutes. And then, really, you only get to act for 5 of the 6 turns. You need to spend a turn to rest. Otherwise, you start taking out penalties. So, basically, every hour, you get 5 turns of actions, 1 turn of rest. And then here the round is 10-second rounds for combat. And they're going to give you distances, weight in coins. There's more about encumbrance. Okay, they have 2 styles of encumbrance, basic and detailed. That's fine. I'm not going to read through the basic one, but maybe that's a good, if you don't want to go into all the nitty-gritty of tracking everything, maybe a basic encumbrance system would work well. And there are other ones online. There are tons of homebrew interesting ways of tracking encumbrance. So if you're thinking of throwing it away, maybe do some Google searching and see what options. And of course, if you're watching this or listening to this and you have heard of some nifty encumbrance rooms, drop them in comments or, find me on Reddit, Twitter, wherever, and hit me with them, because I'm always interested in them, and maybe someone else will find them useful. I'll spread them around. Okay. Checks, damage, saves, ability checks. I like ability checks. Very simple way if you want to roll, if a character can do something, knows something. I like having them roll under their ability. The advantage I find with this is you don't have to have skills. And not that I dislike skills. I like skills. But again, you can end up in these spots where, like you see on 5th edition, is it perception? Is it investigation? Just roll under your intelligence. Right? And that, to me, it covers it. I don't know that I need the granularity ultimately of is it investigation versus is it perception? I don't really know if I need it. I don't know if really in the moment, in a game like Call of Cthulhu, I feel like it has more value having a very granular skill system. A game like D&D, I don't know that I really need it. I don't know that it adds all that much. And I also like with ability scores is it favors the players who play to their strengths. So for example, if you have an intelligence of 14 and I'm asking you to roll under your intelligence, you have a better than 50-50 chance of succeeding, which is you get a little boost. That's a little boon for you. Anything that you're rolling to your strength, you have a better, I might add modifiers to it, but ultimately you're going to have a higher than 50% chance of succeeding. That's good. If you're a strong character and you play to your strength, same thing. And the same thing for your weaknesses. In a sense, it enforces your weaknesses. If you're low on intelligence and you're trying to do intelligence-y things like remembering stuff you might have learned in your apprenticeship, but you have a low intelligence, then that's going to reflect that, and that will enforce your lack of intelligence. So I think it's a really clean, easy system. If you want to bring in a lot of other, nitty-gritty, granular skills, that's fine. But I think for the most part, just roll with it. It's just so easy and fast. I don't know. I really like it. I dig it. Okay, damage and healing. Yeah, death if you get to 0. Items can be destroyed. Magic items can be destroyed. Potentially getting a saving throw of sorts if your GM wills it. Healing, 1d3 hit points per complete day of rest. Something to keep in mind. You need to be resting a full day just to get 1d3 hit points. That's another reason why you tend to head to town at some point. It's fine to be, trying to camp out a little bit in the wilderness, but those random encounters start to pile up. And potentially things are maybe hunting you, tracking you, looking for you in some way. You want to get to town because you need to get rest to get hit points back. Remember, at first level, you don't get any you don't get any healing spells, and then at second level, you may have 1 healing spell, which means that maybe 1 person gets healed. But if everyone's low, not going to help that much. It really pushes you back to town, which again is another current in this river that's keeping that water wheel of play turning, because you're going to town and you think, okay, to get back up to full, we're going to need at least 3 or 4 days of rest. Full day's rest, that means we got to pay for, food and lodging. Probably have to still pay any hirelings we have. And now that puts us under the gun of we need to make money because we can't go back and rest until we have money. So what do we do? That's a great tension, right? It keeps that economy going. You're burning through money, so you need more money. It's a good thing. But it can feel a little brutal, and you can feel like you're spending a lot of your time sitting on your butt. But hopefully as a GM, you're not just having people sit around for days and playing that out, unless there's something to play out. But that downtime does give you a lot of chance to play with your little B-plots, your subplots. If you want to put a worm in somebody's ear by having an NPC come and talk to them, or you want to have some other things come in, or have rumors scattering, or do other things, you have the space to do that. I like that. A lot of times the resting gives you that breathing space to let your world really just breathe and come alive. You're not rushing from place to place, thing to thing. Saving throws. Yep, we got our categories. I'm not going to read through them. Saving throws are saving throws. I don't think they're doing anything crazy interesting. Hazards and challenges. All right, climbing. Sheer surfaces. This is nice. It's a callback to the thief ability that basically thieves can attempt to climb stuff which normal people can't unless they have specialty equipment. I like that. That's kind of was arguably the point of the thief, was that they get to do things that are extraordinary as far as those abilities go. It's not just hiding in the dark, it's hiding in shadows. It's not just climbing a wall, it's climbing a sheer surface. Something that the fighter looks at and goes, there's no way I can do that. Thief goes, I got this. That's kind of what their abilities are about. At least that's how I take it. There's contention, obviously, because they're not super clear on it, but having read a fair amount of what some of the original players in the various games, how they ran it and how they played when they were playing in it, I feel like that's kind of the, if you want to say that, rules as written versus rules as intended, I think that's really the intended thief skill use. So I try to be expansive about allowing thieves to do, by default, a lot of stuff that other people would roll for, and then thieves roll for stuff that other people can't do. So we have darkness, some info on infravision, light and surprise. We've got falling damage, getting lost, starving, swimming, drowning. Here we go, wandering monsters. Let's see, what are they saying? Frequency. The referee should roll periodically to determine whether a wandering monster is encountered. The frequency checks depend on the type of area being explored. All right. See Dungeon Adventuring, page 36 for details. All right, chance, type, hiding. Okay, Dungeon Adventuring. So here we're giving us is inside a dungeon. Remember that adventuring, that exploration turn. So this will be 10 minutes. If you're doing a wandering monster check, do the check first. Actions, the party will describe what actions you're doing. You'll describe, the other side of that, what's happening, what the party's doing, if any monsters are encountered. And then the end of the turn, you got all your kinds of different doors. That's fine. Monsters and doors, classically monsters could pretty much open all the doors that were closed, but you as a player, you had to struggle. Same thing with seeing in the dark. Everything in the underworld could see in the dark, but you. It's just kind of one of those things. You can always use your iron spikes to try to keep doors open or keep doors shut, but that doesn't always work, but at least you have an option. I always thought that having the doors swing shut behind a party was a nice tension builder. One, it means that you're not going to be able to just run out because the door might be stuck for you on the way out and it was open when you came in. But then it's also that just atmospheric of bang, bang, as these echoes of doors being shut, and you don't know as a party what exactly is happening. Is it just closing or is something closing them? Good stuff. Whoops. Okay, listening at doors. Oh, I did that. Sorry. Listening at doors. Okay, movement. Resting. Yeah, you have to rest one turn every hour. That's what I already talked about. So movement, you're generally moving slowly in these things because you're trying to be careful. You're trying to look at stuff. You're trying to be quiet. And there's a thing for if you're in a familiar spot, you can try to move a little faster. You could search. Again, the basic time is essentially 10 minutes, right? One turn to search 10 by 10. Just round up or round closest, whatever's your druthers. Two kinds of traps. Okay, so this is what I was worrying about, this treasure trap. See, that's one of the instances where they make a term. I don't think this exists in BX, but I could be misremembering. Treasure traps, and now you have to really come forward before you figure out. They tell you what a treasure trap is versus a regular trap. So a treasure trap is a small trap placed on an item to prevent it being tampered with or stolen, e.g. a poison needle on a chest or lock, and they are differentiating that from a room trap, which is a large trap that is designed to affect anyone who enters a certain area. So what they seem to be saying for the thief is that the thief can disarm treasure traps, but they don't have an ability to disarm room traps. I don't know that I agree with that, but maybe it's a reading of BX, and I have to go back and look at it. But I would say I'm not sure I'm down with the clown on that one, but there might be methods to their madness. I don't know. Okay, so there's a bit on triggering traps. Chance of triggering. Usually it's a 2 and 6. It's not a 100% chance. I think that throws a lot of people. A lot of the traps, you think, oh, it goes off all the time, but actually they don't. And actually there's a better chance they don't go off than they go off. But if you have 6 people moving across it and you have a 2 and 6 chance, probably someone's going to set it off. And I think that was partly to, as an explanation of, well, why aren't they off all the time? Or, it's an old dungeon, had this trap sit there, and it's because they, they get stuck in place. They things rot or they rust. But when a party comes banging along, tromping on it, chances are it shakes things loose and maybe gets the trap to trigger. But you could possibly not trigger at all. Maybe you don't trigger it on the way in. You only trigger it on the way out. And again, monsters usually bypass traps. Whoops. Searching for traps. Yep, treasure traps. Okay, wandering monsters. Typically every 2 turns in the dungeon. I think I didn't do it that many times, but maybe that's the BX default. I think I did once in... Did I do once or twice an hour? I don't remember, but okay, once every other turn. Distance. All right, oops, no, I keep going the wrong way. There we go. Encounters. As an encounter begins when the characters stumble onto a monster, either because the ref has planned an encounter in the area or the PCs are exploring because of a random die roll. I like these sequences. I think that's nice. So you can get it gives you a little sort of highlighted box. It tells you sort of how things run. So in this case, encounter sequence, you're going to check for surprise, check for distance, going to get initiative, you're going to pick actions, and then after everything's done, you're going to conclude it, and you're going to go forward 1 exploration turn. And remember, this is not combat necessarily. This is just the encounter. But initiative is good. This is one of the things I think if you can train your party, that when you say roll initiative, it doesn't mean you're attacking. But what it means is that you've slowed down time because everything's important. So if you're doing first contact with a potential opponent, but maybe friend, some kind of creature you don't know or understand, you want to put things, you're slowing down time, and who goes first is important, right? It's not about necessarily attacking. So if you can train them to look at initiative as just timing is important and not combat is starting, that's a good thing. All right, so surprise, when do you check? You're going to roll. Usually 1d6. It can depend. Usually 1 or 2 means they're surprised, but some creatures, and I think elves usually it's maybe just 1 and 6. And then whether both sides are surprised or one side surprised, you check the distances. You're going to get your initiative. And then you have, the actions the players can decide, the monsters can decide. Then you have reactions, which is great. Are they hostile? Do they attack? Are they maybe unfriendly? Are they just neutral? Are they indifferent? Are they friendly? And so those actions include combat, evasion, parlay, right? So you can try to fight it, of course, but you don't have to. And I would argue you should think carefully before you do. You can try to evade them. You can try to run away. In the white box, not in BX, but in the white box, they actually have a great little bit where it talks about if you're running away from unintelligent monsters, you can try to drop food behind them to distract them. And if they're intelligent, you can try to drop loot behind you to distract them. So some interesting options. It's not just a who's faster foot race kind of thing, but you could try to essentially drop stuff behind you and distract the creatures. And of course, you can talk to them. Then you have your movement, you have your evasion, and then the conclusion's over when, it's one way or another, things have been solved. And here we get into combat. The combat sequence, you have to declare your spells, or if you're running away from something, then you roll initiative. Then you go the winning side, and then you go, morale, which is great, movement, missile attack, spell casting, melee attacks, and then the other side goes. You have to declare your spells in advance. You can't cherry pick it. You can't say, oh, if we go first and I'm high in the initiative, then I'm going to cast a spell. You have to say so beforehand. You have to commit to it, which is good. You have to think about it, which also means that because a spell is almost last, or it's not, well, it's really after, but as far as attacking goes, it's between missile attacks and melee attacks. If you're a wizard in the back and they have an archer, you may have to be careful because you start waving your arms around your casting. Archer targets you, hits you, you lose your spell. Bing, bang, boom. All right. Rolling initiative, slow weapons go last. Optional rule for individual initiative. Optional rule for monster morale. It should not be optional. It should just be by the book. I think in BX it's technically optional too, so I get why they put it that way, but just use morale. I don't see where they have it here. Just say the referee rolls if appropriate to see if monsters flee from combat. It could be a little bit more expansive than that. You can obviously put in whatever rules you like, but morale is a good thing. Helps short-circuit combats. Not everything can or should be to the death. Makes things a lot more dynamic if monsters are running away. Maybe they're retreating in good order. Maybe they're throwing down their weapons and begging for their lives. It's a really great thing to stop combats from being all do or die slogs, which they shouldn't be. Very few things should just fight to the death. That should be very circumstantial. You get it if you've cornered a wild beast in its cave and has nowhere to go, it's probably going to fight to the death. But maybe it can leap over you and get away, and it would do that. Maybe if it's just fighting over food, it'll leave. Find different food, right? So, and of course, intelligent creatures generally want to live. They generally just don't go in. They may die, but they're not really out to fight to the death. It just happens to them. If they see that the tide is turning against them, they may try to run, surrender, whatever they can do. So play with that. It's good. All right, movement. If you're in melee, you can move backwards up to half your rate. There has to be a clear path. And then the character, you can also turn and run, but if you do, opponents get a +2 bonus to attack you. But it's not an opportunity attack. They don't get a freebie. But, archers, other things. And remember, you've decided beforehand, so you're stuck with it. Whoops. Missile attacks, range modifiers, targets behind cover. I don't need to go through that. Spell casting. It's the only thing you can do. You can't move, can't do anything else. Have to have line of sight generally. You have to have the freedom to move around and do all your gesticulating and chanting, and then if you're hit, you lose your spell. Melee attacks are possible. Opponents are okay. Yeah, other side. Okay, and the other side goes through. All right, yeah, attacking 1s and 20s. 1's a fail, 20's a success. Notice they don't say critical. They're just an auto fail or auto succeed. Okay, and vulnerabilities, attacks per round, attacking and moving. All right, so you got attacking in a little highlighted box here. Attack rolls, ascending armor class, all good. Rolling for damage, fine. Variable weapon damage. I don't know why they say optional, because all the equipment had variable weapon there. So, the mighty attack matrix. Beep, 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 beep. Yeah. All right, so they mention here about demi-humans, but isn't covered in this book because this is the freebie. But then they also have a note about high-level play. Here's the matrix. Super easy. Just, you know what the armor class is. Generally, it's descending. 9 is the worst. -3 would be the best. If you are a first-level fighter and their armor class 0, you got to roll 19. And again, you can do the math. Oh, it's armor class 2. You know that your THAC0 to hit armor class 0 is 19. So you would subtract 2, knowing that it's to hit armor class 2, 17. Easy peasy, but the matrix is easy to read. And you notice that they don't go up every turn. Every level. It'll be in kind of groups of levels, but fighters and demi-humans go up the fastest, and then cleric thief, and then magic user at the end. Examples, fine. Attack rolls using THAC0, optional rule. Okay, basically you're doing the math in your head instead of using the table, fine. Magic. All right, I'm not going to go through the magic spells, right? We all know the magic spells. I think they're going to be basically clones of the original spells with maybe slightly different names, but we all know them. We all love them. I don't think there's anything here. You can reverse spells potentially. If your deity disfavors you, you could potentially lose your ability to cast spells. Alignment also plays a role, at least in divine magic. Fine. Got your spell books. Got your adding spells, your spell books. You can lose your spell books. You can capture spell books. Here we have just our list of spells. First, second, third for clerics. First, second, third for magic users. And then we're going to go through it. I think they mentioned in one of their other... Whoops. So here they have... This is the full game. You can get these lovely boxes. They look nice. I can't afford to buy these right now, and I just don't have the need for them. But if you want to help me out on Patreon or whatever and help me raise some coin to get these, if there's something you'd like me to take a look at and check out, then yeah, you can do that. Buy them now. There's the open game license. And we're at the end. So, conclusion. What do I feel about Old School Essentials? These are the basic rules. Again, they are free. I will find the link to drive through and toss that in there. I think they're good. I don't think there's anything wrong with them. The only weirdness I found was maybe a couple of those tables, just me personally. I would have laid it out slightly differently, but there's certainly nothing wrong with what they did. That's more just maybe just, I don't know, my just the way I see things. Is it worth buying or investing in? I think it's going to depend, right? So if you already own BX, I don't think you need old school essentials. Like ultimately, if I wanted to play a OSR game, and BX would be probably my chassis of choice for running an old school game. I don't feel the need to get old school essentials. Maybe some of their modules. I haven't looked at their full offerings of the different other little books and things that they have. Maybe there's some stuff in there that adds to the game that's that would be useful and interesting. And I would say, I would incorporate that. I'd have to look at those individual products. And again, let me know if some of those you recommend or what we should look at, or maybe what I should cover in another video. But as far as default rules, BX gives me everything I need. They mentioned in these that they did correct some errors in BX. They did say there's a link to a document which, in a sense, goes over the errata or what they changed or fixed. So I might look at that, but whatever errors are there, I don't think I found to be big deals. I don't remember them ever really affecting me. So I don't know. So ultimately, if I have BX, if you have BX, do you need this? No. If you have BX, but maybe you want to give a rule set to your players, maybe you own the BX books, but your party doesn't, your table doesn't, and you want to distribute a rule set and do so, in full compliance with, copyright and whatnot, then grab some of these free sets and hand them out. I mean, they don't have everything because you're missing demi-humans at the very least. BX by default had those in there, and this does not. But other than that, it's got everything. Got everything you want. Like I said at the beginning, you're in a weird, interesting spot because BX is available now. All these old rule sets, these classic rule sets, they're all available in either digitally or in print or both. So, and I always find value in reading the original rules. I think to me, it's more interesting to go back and read Basic Expert or go back and read Holmes than to read a clone of Holmes. I don't need, at this point, and there was a certain time where it was hard to get them, and so the closest you could get to something like the original BX box set was to get a clone. Now you can buy them on drive-thru. They're also available digitally, and you can still find them on eBay. But the fact that you get them digitally means that you don't have to get somebody else's interpretation of Basic Expert. You can just get Basic Expert, right? So it's really going to come down to maybe who you want to support more, how you want to run it. Because remember, they're all compatible. This is 100% compatible with BX. So you can have BX and run stuff that's designed for old school essentials or any other clone or any other OSR game, really, with depending on the game, minimal conversion type stuff. But if you have BX, you can run. And probably I would say, maybe it's more interesting if you are a historian of the game, if you're curious to see what it was like, to read the original ones as opposed to somebody essentially rewriting and tweaking the original ones. But there's nothing wrong with this set, and I think it's excellent. Like I said, let me know if these are rules that, if there are other aspects of these rules, other modules, other bits that you would like me to check into. Happy to do that. As usual, if you enjoy this, wherever you're getting it, give me a thumbs up, subscribe, whatever. That's great. I have a Patreon. I have a Ko-Fi. You can help me out that way. If I'm going to buy more books in this series to look at, I need to buy them. So it's helpful, if you want to contribute to the cause for me to review something, then that helps me out. Like I said, but anything you do, whether it's just using your mouse and throwing a like my way or subscribe, hey, I appreciate it. It really does help me out. But I hope that was useful, and I hope you enjoyed it. I hope I was able to provide some small, maybe amount of insight, or at least walking you through the rules and letting you know what's up with the old school essentials. Until next time, I will, I'll check you out. But have a great afternoon and talk to you later.